Hey everybody, AJ here. I just wanted to give a quick heads up at the top here that there is a little bit of audio distortion throughout this episode. I believe it was down to some Discord connection issues between myself and Adam, and I was unfortunately unable to fix it all in post. It's not ideal, but at the same time, I think it definitely could be worse. I've done my best to tidy it up as best as I can. As I say, just wanted to give a bit of forewarning to those who are maybe a little bit sensitive to audio quality stuff. At any rate, I hope you'll all stick around and listen to the full episode. This discussion with Adam of Snyder's Return was super interesting and just an all-round fun interview. Without any further ado, let's get into it. Cheers. Hey everyone, welcome back to Pretending with Dice. As always, I'm your host AJ. Today's episode is another one of our interview bonuses, and I'm honoured to be joined by the host of a great RPG podcast that also mixes tabletop RPG interviews with actual play gameplay, Adam of Snyder's Return. Thanks so much for joining me today. How's it going?
Well, thank you, AJ. The honour's all mine for joining you on your podcast. But my day's going pretty well. Thank you very much.
I mean, let's sort of get right into it for listeners who sort of maybe haven't heard of you guys. I mean, you, as I said, sort of you sort of do a mixture of interviews and actual play. Was that sort of a plan from the beginning?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That was in no way structured or planned or sort of conceived as that. The intention when I suggested to the group who sort of make up the rest of Snyder's Return is, do you want to do a podcast? You know, a bit of fun, just give it a try and see where we end up. And so we started recording some sessions and sort of going into it. So we sort of got a weird mix back catalogue as we were trying to finish one campaign and, we'll start another one for the podcast. So, it doesn't make sense to start in the middle of something. So we'll square that away. And then while I was doing that, I was like, well, I want something else. If I haven't got an episode ready, where do I go next? A listener's going to drop off. The panic, almost analysis paralysis of where do I start and where do I go next? I was like, I'm just gonna put an email together and send out to a couple of people and hopefully someone responds for an interview.
Yeah.
If I get 2 or 3 of those as fill-in episodes between the adventure, then I'm laughing. That gives me a bit of break to edit, and it just developed from there, really.
I mean, cards on the table. That's pretty much where these kind of bonuses came with us as well. I mean, we pretty much started off as like an actual play kind of thing, with that idea being kind of the main focus, and then, as you say, you sort of see the backlog kind of running out and go, I'm going to need something to put out. What am I going to do here? So, I mean, probably a couple of years ago now. I mean, God, I lose track of how long we've been doing this. Where I sort of thought, okay, well, we need a few different bonus things to put out, and interviews was one I kind of landed on as like one of the options. And it's I think it's good to have something to sort of break up the storylines as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I decided that instead of breaking up the storylines, I'd be silly and try and run the two in parallel. So maybe that's my own pitfall there.
Yeah. Well, I say it's. It's different people who come to the podcast for different things as well. Because I'm sure there's people who'll see, that this person's being interviewed. I definitely want to listen to that and maybe come on to the actual play through that way as well. It's an interesting way of doing it.
We certainly hope so. And I mean, you guys have got yourself and the rest of your podcast have far more experience than we've got. But we're always keen to welcome people over and sort of support those that are already out there.
You guys haven't really been going too long then, have you? I had a quick look on your website. Just under a year, is it? Coming up on the year mark?
And slowly approaching that. I mean, our first episode was, May? And then our first sort of the start of our actual playing the episodes was June. So, we're not even a year old yet. And hopefully we can, as you have, continue over the years, develop stories, develop characters, a following, and just engage with the community that's out and around. So
Yeah, I mean, it's I'll tell you now, the time tends to fly once you get rolling as well. But yeah, I find this whole kind of the community of tabletop podcasts, especially sort of, I feel like it's quite close knit in the UK. As in, there's, I mean, in general, there's a lot of tabletop RPG podcasts, but I feel like America has got like the sort of the lion's share of them by a big sort of margin, really. But I mean, we were able to connect through I think it changed its name recently to Actual Play UK Discord server, but there was before that, I think it was just called UK and Ireland Tabletop RPG. Jordan changed the title, and I can't remember exactly what it was. Yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, I think everybody we're all sort of as a community, I've found it quite supportive, and that everybody's generally pretty happy to sort of talk to one another and kind of help out wherever they can, as it were. So yeah, and I've actually seen on that server recently. I mean, I think I said I would get involved, but I do need to apologise because I've been a bit snowed under with sorting out things. But you've been putting together quite a large group project recently, haven't you, through that server?
Yeah, definitely. We've been taking a bit of a shift, trying out some new game systems, and one of the systems I personally have been looking at and have been trying to sort of put a game together and a wider project is the City of Mist RPG by Son of Oak, powered by the Apocalypse game. It's really evocative. It sort of meshes the real world struggles with sort of myths and legends, and sort of comes together in a sort of episodic almost campaign to solve cases, delve into sort of personal issues, and one of the cases that is presented is called Gambling with Death. And I was having a read through, and I thought this could work as a bit of a sort of almost improv or free flow actual play. That the DMs and the people we have on that server and a few other places are so talented that they run these games for their groups with little to no script or framework. But this has a script, almost. This has a definite framework. Why can't I bring some people in and try and put it together and then turn it into an audio drama and sort of really sort of bolster the community engagement from that side of things? Trying something a little bit different. We are going to move on to do a City of Mist actual play, but that's something we're sort of ramping up to in the background. So that will be in the next sort of couple of months. That will be sort of starting to hit our podcast feed.
I mean, the whole idea of sort of putting together like a kind of, as you say, like an audio drama, but sort of from voices that listeners from the community might sort of go, oh, that's so and so from this, this podcast. That's so and so from this podcast. I really love the sort of, like I say, the community spirit behind all that and everything. And I feel like, just in general, as kind of like a genre, I mean, doing actual play podcasts, we're kind of adjacent to audio drama anyway. I kind of feel. I know we've sort of, in our run, we've kind of wavered a little closer and further away from that, sort of definition as we go. I mean, yeah, the idea of doing like a fully voiced audio drama is real, is a lot of fun to me.
As you say, there's many moving parts with it. There's a lot of people involved, so it's sort of tying things together, freeing people up at the right sort of time, and not bogging down and taking people away from their own creative output, like yourselves and your podcast. So we're trying to work together without undermining each other's productivity. So there is a desire to get it done, not wanting to force people to feel like they have to do that over their own stuff. We're definitely trying to sort of foster that goodwill and good intention, get in contact with people when they have the chance, sort of pair some podcasts together who may not have worked directly before, or individuals from the podcast, and then sort of bring it all together. And it might take a month, 2 months. It might take slightly longer just to fine tune the audio and the editing and things like that. But I hope with a bit of patience and all the goodwill, as I've mentioned, and the hard work from those in that community and the wider community, that I know it will be worth it. It's just presenting that to the listeners and the community at large.
Definitely something for I would think listeners of every podcast involved to look forward to, I would think, because it really sounds like a fun project to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, I'm always excited when I see somebody doing something fun. With playing with the medium a little bit and that. was this sort of an idea that you'd come up with fairly early on, in sort of planning the podcast together, that it was going to be sort of a potential platform for launching bigger projects, or was this a more recent kind of idea? This kind of
It was looking out into what the wider community was doing. I hadn't really used much of Twitter before then, or the other social media platforms. But the more I sort of started to put our podcast out, the more I saw what other podcasts were doing together. So out of a little bit of jealousy, I was like, why can't I get us involved? Why can't we get other people involved with us? What is it stopping us from joining these collaborations and integrations, crossovers, and all those sorts of really good things that the community are doing? And the answer was us, me. I'd not reached out, and I thought, okay, let's just chance the arm. I'd spoken to, in some of the interviews, some of the really nice people from various podcasts who basically said, just ask, just put yourself out there. What's the worst they can say? No, or it's not convenient, or we'll come back to you. And that's, initially a few people I think were hesitant. We are a new and small podcast. We're sort of meshing two systems and trying to not grow beyond our means, but certainly sort of keep expanding and sort of drawing new people in and reaching out to those in the circle. So yeah, we just stopped ourselves initially, I think. And it wasn't until we took that initial step and I got some courage from a few of the interviews I had that I went for it. So
yeah, I mean that's something I've definitely found with this, just getting involved in this community myself. So I still feel like I'm kind of, I'm not really interacting as much as I could be, really, because I mean everybody. But then every time you speak to somebody else, they're always super happy to talk about stuff, which is just like, as I say, it's quite a welcoming community, and I found that myself quite early on, kind of dipping my toe into the kind of actual play sort of thing, because this is I've mentioned before on other episodes, and that this isn't my first podcast that I did. Previously I did a kind of more sort of general, sort of a little bit stereotypical to white guys talking about popular culture kind of podcast for a couple of years. So but this was a bit of a change of pace, and not really knowing who to talk to at first, I was just kind of like, okay, we'll just sort of see how it goes. And then I was lucky enough to get sort of a couple of people reaching out to me and going, hey, what's your deal? And then everybody was sort of, I say everybody's just been super welcoming since then. So it's, it's been great, really. As I say, I never feel like I'm interacting enough, but that's my own thing, I guess.
I think we all have that. Some people call it imposter syndrome. Some people sort of have maybe a natural shyness or a concern that maybe there's an element of I don't know, rejection or not wanting to be sort of thrust in the limelight in the same way. But hopefully, through the communities that are building, the other Discord servers for the official games and the fan ones, people can feel more confident, and people like us as podcasters can reach out to others, and we can all share the limelight, the spotlight for a short period. And then if people want to go back to what they're doing, then obviously they're free to do so.
For sure.
And we just roll on to the next project. So as I say, we have been looking to do this Gambling of Death, which is coming on. We've got great interaction from the community, and we are looking to change game system and bring a couple of new players in, sort of shift the focus so we can have some Dungeons and Dragons on the go, try and maintain that storyline and that campaign and the energy there. Some City of Mist stuff, some one shots with the Alien RPG from Free League Publishing, and just try a couple of new things because we're able to. The sticking point is always time and availability, but that is true in everybody's life. And whether podcasting is your job or whether you have a 9-to-5 or other work or family commitments, we always try and find a time that suits the other party because it's them that's making the sacrifice. One of the things I picked up and I've seen a couple of times on Twitter and other social media is that whole a rising tide raises all ships or words to that effect. So that's what we're sort of trying to get in and assist with, really.
So to sort of pick up on a point you said there, then, so you bring it. You've started off with D&D, obviously. I mean, I feel like a lot of us. It's a good. It's always a good starting point for these podcasts because there's kind of a little bit of a built-in audience, and then we all kind of branch out from there. Are you planning to sort of keep putting out D&D episodes while you're putting out other ones, sort of intercutting them as you have been, or is this going to be sort of done in kind of sort of a block of D&D and then a block of Alien, or what's the thinking?
The Alien stuff is just for one shots and guess, and just a different game style for me and my own experience, selfishly, and something a bit different. So sort of like maybe a mid-season break or just a break from the action. The D&D stuff, we are going to be recording more episodes and following that on. But I'd like to run, almost giving myself too much work probably, but run alongside that City of Mist, so we can offer different game systems. So if people want to listen in, they can choose to listen to the D&D stuff, and then that will repeat on the same day. So the interviews we release on a Tuesday, the D&D stuff we release on a Thursday.
Right.
If I can edit and put out a City of Mist on the Saturday, then 3 times a week you can listen to our content, or once a week if that's the content you're listening for. We'll still continue to our sort of promo crossovers and stuff like that, and just keep trying to support people in that respect as well.
I'm super impressed with the sort of the volume of content then going, even as you say now, doing interviews on one and then D&D on another day, like every week is that's quite an impressive amount to be putting out all the time, and adding a third day is, my hat's off to you on that one. I know, well, from experience, how much sort of how much time editing can take, at least to get things how you like it and that. So it's yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to do as much as I can now, because at some point work is gonna come in and sort of put an enforced break. So away from the podcast, I say away from the podcast, outside of the podcasting side of stuff, I'm in the Royal Navy, so I have sort of military commitments and service commitments there. So at some point, I know that is going to come in and say, right, we need you to go X for X amount of time, and I won't be able to get to the computer to upload. So I'm trying to ensure I've got content built up and stuff that I'm interested in, get interviews in, and have it all ready so I can, if I have to put it to one side, I know that things are going to get released. I know that there'll be interest there. So if one of my co-players doesn't sort of take up the mantle and sort of help put episodes out, I know that there are things that are going to be programmed. So at the moment we have episodes ready recorded to be released up until May.
Wow.
Which it's good in some respects, because it means I have that longevity. I've got guaranteed releases and all good. But they were all recorded autumn, winter last year, which makes some of the information dated. A lot of the advice that's provided is kind of timeless. It sounds a bit cheesy saying like that, but how to get into podcasting, how to GM, how to edit, how to get into writing, different techniques and all that sort of stuff that the various content creators give. But that stuff will stand the test of time. But things like a few of the mentioned releases that at time of recording were sort of hush-hush projects almost, time of release will be either at time of release or maybe slightly later or around that sort of time. So some of them tie in, but some of them will be a little bit dated. We'll be talking about how it's cold and it'll be spring, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just having that much of a sort of, as you say, like a deep well of stuff to pull from is, again, I'm super impressed with that as well. I mean, I mentioned this. I mean, listeners, our previous interview would have heard me talking to Fiona from What Am I Rolling? And I think I referred to my process pretty much as that one bit from The Wrong Trousers, where Gromit's on the front of a train slapping down track. That's kind of what that's sort of how I am. So yeah, anybody who's got the wherewithal to have that much of pre-planning going on in this is definitely Yeah.
Well, you say pre-plan, but that came again from my initial start and not really knowing how I was going to structure the podcast properly. So I was just throwing out invitations to. I was pitching as high as I could get, and surprisingly, most of them said yes. Some people are unavailable. Some people defer to a later point in time. Some people I haven't heard back from, but that's life.
Yeah.
But a lot of them said yes. So I was like, well, now I actually have to do these interviews. I have to learn how to interview someone and do lots of them in a short space of time. So I'd built a back catalogue before I'd even realised what I was doing. So it's definitely worked in my favour in that respect, because there'll always be. I aim to always have an episode a week to release, and the interviews being there give me that structure.
I guess. I mean, with an interview, is there a little bit less little bit less editing that's needed? Yeah.
So as you say, with the episodes, the limited amount of editing required. So as you say, when I finished asking a question, I will sit back away from the mic because I make that horrible smacking sound with my mouth when I start to talk. I somehow knock the boom mic, even though it's like a couple of feet away from me, and I've got it stretched out so I can't like knock it when I'm making notes and things. So most of the noise that I'm editing out is self-induced, which is great because then I can just spot it between the questions and highlight it and silence it or edit it. Luckily, the guests have been really good. I might have to tweak volume levels or take out some repeat sections, or in one case we'd sort of going off on a tangent and they asked, just would you mind just maybe taking that bit out? I was like, yeah, not a problem. So yeah, the interviews, the timing for editing them is, I slap on the intro music, the outro, which is pre-recorded, and the editing in the middle, and it's a lot quicker than what background music fits this scene. Do I need a sound effect? Do I need to tweak each individual player's levels? Do I need to cross-reference or sort of cross-fade between two sections? That sort of stuff that the actual play challenges throw up.
I definitely find that with ours. I mean, these bonus ones, I mean, let's say we do the interviews, we do... the other main one we do is our kind of world-building episodes. All of our D&D is set within our own sort of homebrew setting. And me, as I say, grommet on the train, most of it isn't written. So, we found it as a good source of kind of extra episodes is to sit down and go like, right, what should we come up with for the setting this time? And yeah, my philosophy with those has very much been like, okay, if we can record the whole thing without anything I need to cut out, that is a perfect, easy episode for me to put out. I just, as it says, music on the front, music on the end, maybe a little bit of and ahhing removing if I'm feeling super self-conscious, but otherwise fine. And then that sort of night and day with our regular actual play kind of episodes. I'm in there. I've, similar sort of thing to you, as you say, adjusting levels, but then I'm writing the music, sound effects, there's cutting, we've upgraded our setup, so now when we do in-person recordings, everybody's on their own channel, which is great, but then it's 4 times the editing, so yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. With respect to actual play, one of the things I found, and it might seem a bit like a cheat, I guess, is I've started restricting episode lengths because a few of them have been like an hour, and to edit an hour's worth of 4, 5, 6 people's worth of audio is taxing on the mind. So I've started to find convenient points, and I've sort of purposely looked to make it between sort of half an hour and 45. That's manageable, which it normally comes out of 2 hours worth of audio, as I'm sure you're used to. So by condensing the episode slightly, it gives me a little bit more flexibility as to where to put the breaks in, how much sound effects and cleanup I need to do per episode, which has seemed to, it might just be a psychological thing, but it seems to have made the editing, from my perspective, easier, because I'm like, right, I'm 20 minutes into this episode, it's probably going to take me another hour to sort the audio out and drop in the effects, then I'll slap on the intro, slap on the outro, that's then that done.
Yeah.
We started putting in mid-roll promos for other podcasts, which is really great. So I'll get it to a point, find that convenient middle section, then make sure that I add in that audio, so we can do our bit to, as we probably have said over and over, keep supporting the others in the community. So that buoys me as well.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of, as you say, sort of 30 to 45 minute length is quite, I mean, from my sort of how I approach podcasts, that's a very manageable length for me as a listener, if you know what I mean. That's kind of perfect sort of commuting sort of time for me.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I'm all for longer podcasts. You know, I think our average is probably about an hour, but I think my personal sort of thing is if I'm coming at a podcast for a listener and I'm looking at a feed full of 2 hour long, 3 hour long episodes, that's quite daunting. Whereas I think being able to look at it and go, oh, look, okay, these are, you know, 35, 40 odd minutes, you know, that's quite welcoming to me as a new listener.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was something also we were kind of, again, sort of quite, I'd say fairly conscious of when we're putting ours together, of like, I didn't want to go too long. And as you say, you kind of, you find, at least I do, when I'm editing, I'm kind of looking for like a cliffhanger ending.
Yeah.
Of sort of like, okay, this is going to be like, knowing what's coming next from the rest of the recording, this would be a good spot to stop. And like, whether that's like at an hour and 5 or whether sometimes I've come to that point and I'm looking at it going, oh, we're only 40 minutes in. Okay, well, how can I stretch this out? Or not so much stretch this out, but you kind of look at it as like, oh, the previous episode was an hour and 10. This one's going to be 40. Is this going to feel a bit of a switch? But I feel, like you say, I feel anything from like half an hour to an hour and a quarter is quite a manageable sort of length for me. As like when I look at a feed of you know, podcasts as a listener. So yeah, if you had much sort of in the way of kind of feedback on that, you know,
we've had a couple of reviews and a few people have given me other useful constructive feedback, constructive criticism. I'm not 100% sure how best to phrase that, but the support has been mainly positive. There are areas on the podcast that I was aware of and need to work on, and that's going to take some coordination between myself and the players. But that's an in-house thing. With respect to sort of structure and length, because we chop and change because we're structured to do the interviews and the actual play, and we're still new. We're still building up that engagement and sort of review culture. So if anybody wants to leave a review, having listened to an episode, thank you very much. That's greatly appreciated. You know, and if we start getting that more consistent feedback that we can work on and I can work on, develop certain things, tweak certain things to suit what the listener wants. And that's ultimately what we're there. We have a good time playing. We try and make the story and the actions interesting while still maintaining our own bit of personality. But we don't want to alienate people because it's our game we stuck on an audio file and pushed out to the world. We want to be able to involve the listener, maybe not directly, but there's a couple of podcasts that I listen to where you feel like you're part of the group.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you're listening to a podcast. You feel like you're there while they're recording it and while they're going through the adventure. And that's the kind of the sensation and feel we would like to get. Certainly with the City Mist stuff we've got coming up, notwithstanding the audio drama side of things with gambling with death, but the City Mist actual play, because it's going to be more episodic, more sort of like a TV series, Netflix thing. We're going to look to try and sort of build the drama and bring people into the character's story because the game supports that kind of storytelling. I'm not saying D&D doesn't, and there's some fantastic D&D and Pathfinder, Starfinder, whatever system is being used to tell those sort of multi-layered, deep character stories. We just haven't found that balance on that yet, and that is something we're working on and looking to improve and you know, grow as people, as well as characters, as well as a podcast, as well as part of a community. So some lofty goals there, I guess, but you know, we're trying.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I'm also I'm always quite conscious of. Is that I love playing these games with my friends. It's that, you know, it's it's one of my favorite things to do. But at the same time, we're also putting out a show that people, I want it to be fun for people to listen to, as well as, people can be interested just on the general level of like, I like tabletop RPGs. This is a tabletop RPG podcast, but I want it to kind of be sort of accessible to sort of, fun to listen to, fun to put on, and not, at least my sort of nobody wants to hear an hour of people rolling dice. They want to hear, like you say, the engaging stories, have it feel like they're at the table having fun with people and stuff as well. It's very much, I think I'm very much on the same page as you there, of like wanting it to be accessible to people, and sort of, as you say, feel like it's feel like you're part of the fun, rather than just sort of listening to, okay, here's 4 or 5 people sat around a table who happen to have pressed record on a mic. You want it to feel like you're in and part of it. Is definitely an important thing for me, I think. To definitely, like I say, I feel like the best shows, the ones that last and tend to have the following, are always ones that I feel like they've gone that extra mile to sort of have it be, a fun thing to listen to. If you know what I mean.
From my perspective, sort of taking on that, it's almost like character first, be that the character of the players or the characters of off the character sheets come first, and then the dice and the mechanics kind of sort of become I won't say a distant second, but they come second. They are not what makes the podcast. They are what is used to produce the podcast. Without the structure and the framework of the sort of the game system, then it is just an audio drama. And there is nothing wrong with audio dramas. Not trying to beat down on that community. Please don't hate me. But yeah, the as you say, the longevity of podcasts is built around people's engagement with character rather than mechanic. Because we can all like different game mechanics, but I bet you could name on one hand or two, or however many fingers you choose to possess in this day and age, who is your favorite character from what actual play, be it a stream or a podcast. You could probably rattle a few off. Does it matter what system they're playing? Not so much. No,
you're coming back because you like the people and you like what you're hearing as a fun time, rather than coming back to hear a string of numbers. That's sort of what
absolutely.
So I mean, as a kind of ongoing sort of starting point, then was D&D kind of what you and your castmates were playing prior to the podcast, like, or was that sort of a choice at the beginning as sort of that this seems like this would be something fun to people to listen to, or was that very much your go-to game?
Well, in my youth, I was aware of Dungeons and Dragons and various sort of choose your own adventure, and the vague awareness of other game systems and things. I attempted to play Warhammer in my teens, couldn't afford it, couldn't understand it, put it to one side, and many other sort of hobbies and that sort of fell by the wayside. And it wasn't till 5-6 years ago now, one of my friends, work colleagues, said, "Would you fancy playing it? Have you heard of Critical Role?" And I think this is true for a lot of people at the moment. Have you heard of Critical Role? I was like, no, I haven't. And yes, I will give Dungeons and Dragons a go. I know kind of what it is. I played like Hero Quest, which is being re-released, I believe. It's a new edition. It's got like Joe Magniello. Apologies, Joe. Joe Magniello.
He's not listening to this.
You'd be surprised. I wouldn't rule it out, because the world is a smaller place in certain communities, and don't write yourself off.
Okay. Well, I won't. I'll tag him in the tag him in the link.
There you go. Well, you say that. I tried to approach him through various platforms for an interview. Joe, if you are listening, that invitation is obviously still open. And someone popped up with a fake account and tried to make communications with me. So then ended up in a weird kind of comms triangle where he, the real one, actually got involved to say, no, this isn't. this is an imposter. So technically, I have had interaction with a Hollywood star. So, yeah.
I mean, how long did the scammer think that was going to keep going for? I mean, because if they were, I mean, presumably right up until the point where, I mean, what was their end game? Like as soon as you got on a call or whatever, then you'd realize surely it wasn't him.
Yeah, strange.
Yeah,
but rewinding back to the original story.
Yes, sorry.
So yeah, I played various other systems and sort of left all that stuff to work and concentrate on sort of just life in general. And then was sort of propositioned by a friend, like, right, while we're at work, do you want to try it? I was like, yeah, definitely. So he is Colonel Asaki, who's on the podcast. He and the others who are sort of the core cast, as it were. We've sort of had a slight interchange of personnel, but and cast members, but we all still played together as a group. It's just who gets recorded is changed slightly. So he and a few others, we played and went through the Lost Mines of Phandelver, because I'd not played Dungeons and Dragons properly before 5th edition, and it just kind of swept our lives. So invested in getting the books and D&D Beyond and dice and minis, and I bought dungeon tiles and not Dwarven Forge or anything like that, but the dungeon tiles reincarnated, the cardboard ones that Wizards put out,
sort of room layouts and things, aren't they?
Yeah, ideal for in-person play, which obviously has taken a back seat.
Because of the ongoing situation.
Yeah. So we started playing as that. So he ran Lost Mines of Phandelver, then he did Dragon Horde, Rise of Tiamat. What's the one before that?
Horde of the Dragon Queen, is that it?
Horde of the Dragon Queen. I know it had Horde and Dragon in it. Horde of the Dragon Queen. So he ran that for us while we were sort of all still working in the same place. Then I got enough courage to start DMing, which is why I'm always positive for people wanting to say that they want to MC, GM, storytell, whatever the system is, actually run a game for themselves. Always try and be supportive of those. So we started Tomb of Annihilation, but work got in the way, so that got put on the back burner. We are, as a home game, we're running through The Curse of Strahd. We're very close to the end of that. That's had some twists and turns. And we did start to record that, but we were literally probably a year into that. And while we are recording it, it would take a lot more editing and a lot more filler kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Start doing a OneNote diary to sort of back up and go alongside it. But because of the intermittent play style and things like that, that's kind of dropped off. So we were playing that at home. We started Descent into Avernus, which is the basis for the podcast episodes that we're releasing at the moment. And we do lots of other bits and pieces as well. So that was the lead up to kind of where we are now. But I've always had a wandering eye. It sounds horrible when you phrase it in that respect. You look across, say, Drive-Thru or the other game systems, other podcasts, and you're like, oh, that system sounds interesting. I like that IP. Maybe I'll have a look at that. So recently, I have picked up the Alien RPG. I picked up the Altered Carbon RPG. I picked up Hunters Entertainment's Outbreak Undead RPG to try and run at some point. City of Mist, which I don't know if your listeners have seen the RuneSmith videos. Does a great introduction to the game, and also ran one for the Arcane Arcade. I think I've got the name right. So check that on YouTube. There's other tool plays recommended by the City of Mist website. It sounds like I'm selling it, and I'm not. I'm just that excited to play it that I'd encourage others. It's different to D&D. You put those usual mindsets of what's my armor class, how far can I move in one turn, and all that kind of thought process that takes a backseat to that cinematic style. So instead of saying, can I move 35 feet up to monster X, you just say, I approach table, let's use this move and these power tags to see if you achieve that aim. And the spotlight shifts between the players. It's very much about their story in that moment, and the game encourages you to use noir themes and treat it like you were not only the player's biggest fan, cheering on their characters, but also describing the action from like a cinematic camera. So whether it be over the shoulder or sweeping round a corner or above shots to show chase scenes and things like that, the game encourages that. And I'm not saying D&D doesn't, but the round structure and certain game mechanics in D&D are fun.
Yeah.
And I really I do enjoy it, and I enjoy running it because it's good to see how people come up and solve be it social or combat encounters. But this is a different style of game. That's basically where I was going with that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's got a much more kind of, as you say, kind of fluid sort of narrative focus to it, and I'll be the first to admit, like, having the sort of strict, okay, this round is 6 seconds, you have these 3 actions thing in Dungeons & Dragons, kind of, like you say, it's a little limiting sometimes. The number of times as a DM I've had to say, like, well, no, you can't quite do all that at the same time, is, yeah. So that sounds pretty interesting, actually, like I say. I'll look into it. Yeah, and then I've got, as I say, shelves full of books I haven't yet managed to play a game of yet, but at some point, but yeah. Maybe this month, maybe, yeah. And obviously, as you say, this is the ongoing situation has put a bit of a damper on organising certain things as well. But yeah, it's a little bit unavoidable at the moment. So
it's in many respects, as bad as the situation is, and obviously I'm sure everybody just wants not the situation to pass, but everybody to be in good health and sort of not suffer the impact of what's going on too deeply, too closely. But with the constrictions that have come into place for me personally, I am now able to do my bit at work from home, and then I have time to either sit and edit or organise collaborations or do a bit of world building or pre-reading for sessions and things like that. So it has allowed a certain amount of creative freedom because I'm guaranteed to have certain times available to me. So I've had to try and see it in the positive, because it's very easy to look at situations like, I can't meet up, we can't play in person, and see that in a negative light. But in some respects, it has helped the podcast because people are more readily available at home. And it sounds horrible, but it's true.
Yeah.
We can organise the games a bit easier, and we have that little bit more flexibility.
I suppose, I mean, I don't know, obviously, what happened with your players individually, but I mean, a fair number of people I know got sort of furloughed in that first lockdown. So yeah, I can see that freeing up a bit of time to be like, okay, well, should we just do a game night and things like that? Yeah. It did kind of, I spoke about this before, last time when I was speaking to Fiona. It did kind of throw out our recording plans quite badly, because after 2 or 3 different story arcs of various games where we were recording all over Discord and everything, with various players around the country, we'd finally circled back to doing an in-person group, and then the situation happened, sort of thing. So the first thing went down, we finally managed to get first batch of episodes of that recorded, and then everything went back into lockdown and everything, and it's really kind of thrown us off. But yeah, as I say, I'm trying to look on the bright side, like you say, that you get a lot of time for planning and things. It's an adjustment, let's put it that way, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that phrasing of it.
So yeah, I mean, to circle back then on sort of your sort of entry into D&D and that, you mentioned sort of hearing about it as a younger person, and sort of, it sounds like we had kind of parallel kind of ways into it, sort of. I also, Games Workshop took a lot of my money as a young person, sort of like, again, I never got really that deep into the game, and it wasn't that I didn't really sort of get it. It was just sort of, I kind of ended up preferring the painting side of things when it came to Warhammer and that, and it was always like, oh, that's a nice model, I want to paint that, and then it just sits in their box after I've done it and things. But that, yeah, I guess that was kind of my intro to sort of role, again, not really role playing, but kind of tabletop gaming and things like that. And then later on, coming into this sort of coming in across sort of this type of game as a sort of, okay, we can sort of do this. You know, this is a bit different. This is relevant to my interests, you know, sort of thing. And then coming into it that way, I ended up buying like the whole swath of 4th edition D&D books and never playing a session, which was, because I was that thing of like, oh, okay, you know, I'd be up for doing, you know, trying out D&D. I'll get the books, and then I like them. And I was like, oh, well, there's these books as well. I'll just get them and that. And then, but never really sort of sorting out which one of my friends would be up for playing, which was the wrong way around of doing it, to be honest. And then finally getting a game together to play Star Wars Saga Edition, which was sort of my first one we ran. But then I ended up being the DM kind of out of necessity, because again, nobody else wanted to do it. So yeah, it was because if I want to play these games, I've got to be the one running them.
What helped with my lead in, given the large time gap, was although games like Warhammer sort of dropped away, my interest in things like anime and manga that sustained through, and watching various shows on various genres sort of kept firing that spark, that imagination sort of kept ticking over in the background. And it wasn't until Kern said, do you want to try D&D? I was like, this is my chance. This everything I've watched for the last 5 or 6 years can be culminated into. And it turned out I was playing, I think it's a high elf wizard, sun elf wizard off the starter set, which wasn't quite where my creative vision was, but I understood I needed to take that step to understand the system. Then I could go wild, and with the introduction of various books that were released in D&D Beyond, so you could sort of do it all on the computer and in half the time and make 200 times the amount of characters. I was in my element.
It's definitely, so the tool set is greatly expanded since, as I say, the days when I was buying 4th edition books. I feel like there was like a digital thing you could download, but it was a bit clunky and not particularly user friendly. And yeah, D&D Beyond has just been a big help to be like, hey, here's stuff, go wild, you know. And even as a DM, it's helpful to be able to just quickly look something up on there and that without having to go into my giant bookshelf and be like, oh god, which one was it in, you know. Yeah.
So sounds like I'm interviewing you now, but what other resources do you use? I'm always curious as to find out what sort of whether you use like a virtual tabletop, or if you use camera, or if it's all theatre of the mind. How do you keep track of notes and stuff like that? Because I like to learn from other people in that respect, because often what I've got has been cobbled together from a couple of years of fudging it and faking it, and with yourselves with the far more experience in both podcasting and playing than I've got, it's always good to hear what you use to make your game flow better. If not.
Yeah, I always tend to say, like, don't follow my example, because I feel like I'm really bad at taking notes. I'm really bad at prepping, you know, and having like a big outline. I tend to, rather than get right into the details of things, I'll have a story in mind and like a couple of, you know, like a sort of a general idea of like what's going on, and a couple of big sort of cinematic set pieces kind of in mind, but really that's all I write out ahead of time. So I can't recommend it, to be honest. I might plan a couple of encounters a bit more in depth sort of thing. Usually just writing down kind of monster manual page numbers in a piece of notepaper for myself. So yeah, I really can't recommend taking my route really with that. But yeah, in terms of sort of other tools, when we're doing the podcast, it all tends to be kind of theatre of the mind, to be honest. Because I figure if I can't describe it for the players, then the listeners definitely aren't going to know what's going on. We kind of played around a couple of times before I started doing the podcast with having we had a quick go at sort of Roll20, and that for the virtual tabletop. This was a sort of group I had, you know, pre-podcast. It didn't really work out. It was more kind of down to tech issues and people getting frustrated with it and just going like, I will say there was a rage quit incident involved when we were attempting to get a session going. It was like, oh, this isn't working. Other than that, I mean, yeah, just kind of, I mean, home games, we used to do minis and things. I do find now, especially with, as we said, the situation, not a lot of home games going on. And when I am playing, it's usually to record. So I kind of don't really lean too much on minis and things, to be honest, really. Everybody's got their style, and mine is to, try and keep a variety of silly voices going and not look like I don't know what I'm doing. And that's pretty much the extent of it, to be honest. And it's not the best advice ever, really, but...
We all have our style. I mean, again, when I bought all the tiles, I started buying minis. I still on occasion buy minis because I'm like, that's really cool. I'll put it in the cupboard with the rest. Thank you, Noel, for inspiring me and something else for me to dust every so often.
Yeah. As I say that, I never hold myself up as a DMing style to emulate, really, because I know there's definitely a lot more. I'm always, how should I put it? I'm always impressed by basically everybody else, because I always feel like everybody's a lot more competent than me when it comes across, and when it comes to sort of prep and things like that, I'm more of a kind of, I go into it with sort of like, I guess like from a story focus. I'm kind of, rather than looking at it as like I'm running a game, which is probably what I should be doing, I'm looking at it as like, if I was making this as a film, how would I do it? And then I'm just sort of patching the game elements in later, if that makes sense. Well, as we're running it, I'm kind of adding in the game elements. But yeah, it sort of works with the podcast. I feel like it's been too long, really, since I know whether it would work quite so well if we weren't recording it, and I wasn't planning on adding music and things later. So yeah, it's tough to tell that, because I never really tend to. I mean, we don't go to many cons. We've been to Dragon Meet a couple of times, but I've never been one for running games at cons or anything like that. So yeah, got a bit of a captive audience with my players as well. So you never know if you just kind of drift over time from like, okay, this is maybe not the norm when it comes to running games, but who knows?
I don't know. I mean, with respect to cons, having been outside of having not even been part of the community, because we weren't even a podcast, we weren't really playing until the last sort of 5-6 years, and then getting into podcasting even more recently, cons were, heard of some of the bigger ones, but like PAX and that, but hadn't really thought to attend any. And now I'm like, all these potential options to go and, meet people and interact and form, even if it's just a social bond, not necessarily a collaborative engagement or anything like that, and sort of build those and test, maybe even go and test myself in that kind of environment to run a game. As you say, you build up your own rhythm and mannerisms with respect to running a game. Could I replicate that for other people in a con situation or convention situation? Or I've started being braver with respect to myself and GMing or running games for strangers. Looking for game groups and reaching out to people such as yourself, because I want that feedback of, are they enjoying the way I MC DM or GM? Is my style too descriptive? Am I not descriptive enough? Do I miss out certain information? Do I foreshadow too much? Do I not foreshadow enough? Where am I falling short? Where is my areas for improvement with respect to running a good game? It sounds harsh to say anyone can run a game, but it's true. Anyone can. They can pick up the books, run through the mechanics, form a world, and running a game can be a liberating experience. Absolutely. And one I think that everybody should try at least once, just to see both sides of the coin. But is my style nearly there? It's never going to be finished. There's always things to be learned, new mechanics to learn, new players to engage with, new descriptions. And, I don't sit at night with a dictionary or thesaurus going through to find out some grand term to describe the colour brown.
But, I feel like I should do that, to be honest. I get a bit self-conscious about, like, I know this could sound better, but all I can think of is, like, it looks like a box, or, like, something like that. And then I end up fixing it in the edit, sort of thing, which is a little bit of a peek behind the curtain there for our listeners. Play a fun game, listen back through our old episodes and realise the bits where I've taken out and replaced the narration. Do I fall into the same sentence structure for there's the chest in the corner of the room? You see a
brown wooden chest with gold inlay. Do I repeat that? Do I not vary it? Do I not change the type of chest? Could it be a cube or a rectangle? Or do I just... Where am I not improving this? And how can I do that? So by speaking to yourself, doing the interviews with other podcasters, game designers and things like that, where you get to see how they structure their work, even if it's editing, and I've spoken to a couple of editors, how they weave the words that the writers create, how they intend or have an idea of how DMs or GMs should bring this encounter, be it social exploration or combat, to using the 3-pillar approach there, to their groups. Am I falling short? Have I allowed myself to rest on my laurels in that respect?
I feel like these are all great questions as well, and and it's sort of something that through doing the podcast I find. I mean, I don't know whether this is true of yourself as well, that doing the podcast and having to edit it and listen to yourself talking while you're, sort of stuff you've said before, but then going back and going, oh, do I sound like that? That's the starting point. Is that how I sound? But then through running, I mean, at this point we're up to, I think we've done 77 episodes of game stuff. And I think this is actually probably close to being our 100th episode, but not officially 100th, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because I really only number the game ones. But doing that many, and after a while you hear the sort of patterns of speech of it that, it's been quite sort of illuminating for me to be like, okay, oh God, I always use that sort of phrasing. I always use that sort of kind of tone of voice when I'm about to foreshadow something, or like, there's that one joke I've made 5 times before, that kind of thing. So I feel like doing the podcast is at least for me, been quite helpful in sort of realizing, like, okay, I keep falling into these same speech patterns and whatnot. How can I mix it up? How can I make things a bit more varied, really? So yeah, I think. But yeah, like I say, all the questions you're asking of yourself, it's a good self-awareness sort of exercise, especially when running games of sort of and wanting to be that little bit better as well. Yeah.
As you mentioned, listening back, I sort of cringe a little bit when all of my NPCs have one of 3 variations on tone of my voice. I'm like, I should be able to do more. I have more than just this level tone that I can alter slightly. I can hit a slightly higher register. I can go slightly deeper. Why am I not varying it more? Why does every innkeeper, tavern runner, barkeep, whatever they are, have the same, I don't want to say monosyllabic or monotone sort of voice, but that's what I drop into, and I'm like, right, I've got to consciously think about this now to make this NPC worth the player's interaction, worth the time. I put the time in to put some sort of backstory or an interesting plot hook, or create an encounter that seeds certain things in the story. Am I underselling it with my voice?
Yeah, that's something. That's definitely something I became quite conscious of early on. Sort of trying to, not always successfully, but trying to introduce a few different accents for different NPCs and things but then. There's always a thing there of like, oh God, do I now then take people out of the moment because they're just going, oh, there's AJ doing another stupid voice for this character. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, what sort of, other than the sort of City of Mist things and that, if you got an Alien, have you got any kind of more long-term ambition sort of things on the horizon for Snyder's Return, sort of?
We are, continuing to reach out to new content creators. We are continuing to engage with previous guests. So, we've been fortunate to have James Intricasso on a couple of times, and provisionally he's agreed to come back and speak with us again. And all the work he is doing with MCDM and all the stuff he has done in the past, he is such a deep resource of sort of tabletop knowledge. He has been a podcaster. He has done game design, editing. He is an inspiration of mine, and it was his Demon Plague podcast, which I believe he is rewriting the supplement or going to re-release it due to certain updates required from his own critique. And on there was Lauren Urban and Rudy Basso and a few other players, TK Storm, yeah. And it was that podcast that led me into Dungeon Drunks, which led me into listening to Dungeons and Dragons and Take Initiative, and then swapping systems to listen to Misconceptions and sort of broadening out that scope. That I felt confident enough to reach out to Lauren Urban and have had the pleasure to speak with her and a few other creators, and from her I felt inspired to speak to a few of the cast of Silver and Steel, the D&D Beyond produced actual play stream. So I've been lucky enough to speak to people on there. So that sort of tied into B. Dave Waters, and from there into the vampire scene. I spoke to Ellie Collins, and it's been a knock-on effect. And every link in this chain that we've been making, we're able to sort of loop back to and keep goodwill with them. And find out how their projects are sort of progressing, and hopefully have them back on in the future. And we're trying to introduce new content to really highlight new game systems, new creators, maybe parts of game systems that people are less aware of. You know, there's so many gems hidden on the DM's Guild and Drive-Thru RPG and places like that people may not necessarily be aware of. There are podcasts and actual play streams and YouTube content, for example, that people may be unaware of because no one's mentioned it. It's just not been highlighted in their sort of usual rotation of shows. So we're looking to really bring that side of showcasing and promotion and community together on the interview side of stuff. So that's what we're continuing to work on. You know, our website is functional. I need to tidy it up and square everything away, but it works so that there's resources on there. We use, so Buzzsprout puts out, which means we can attach transcripts. We also add the transcripts onto the website. So if there are those that prefer to read along, I do try and make them read properly.
Yeah.
So you can read along with the interviews and sort of pick out. There's always links to the shows or the guests and their projects in the episodes, as you would expect. So we're trying to sort of build engagement with them. So that's, again, something we're hoping to carry on and carry forward. With respect to the actual play, we've got the D&D side of stuff. Some one-shots, we've got some a few planned and a few more in the works. We're going to hopefully guest on other shows and try out a few different systems. I've never, for example, played Quest, so we are in discussion with podcasts about that. There's the Savage World system. We're in discussion with some people about joining them for like a crossover or one shot with that system. So we're just trying to not spread ourselves too thin, but be as engaged as we can be, because that then allows us to sort of really share the spotlight and promote others. And not only does it benefit ourselves, because it's a feel-good factor of knowing that we've provided, we've created, and we are supportive, but it's that sense of achievement that sort of ties in with that as well. So there's the D&D stuff, the City of Mist stuff that's coming, the audio drama that we're working on as a community. So I'm really excited for that. And the interviews, plus promos, trailers. Occasionally, like the month of January, we took a midwinter break, which allowed us to give a full month just to push out other people's episodes. So we could say, give me your episode that introduces a new listener to your show. And I've had really good feedback, and that allowed me to tie in different game systems, one per week. And tied into that, I was able to also tack on the promotions for podcasts that we had already agreed to promote their stuff. So there's sort of twice the promotion, and also gives me a month to try and steady the ship so I can edit, correct, and keep the podcast moving forward. So we are just shooting for the moon, aiming for the horizon. I'm not sure which analogy or metaphor we're going for, but we're heading in that direction, and we're hoping that we can move with other people too.
A lot of exciting stuff on the horizon then, coming up the feed this year. Then basically,
yeah, there was a lot of words there. The content will come. That is something we're working on. There was a lot of words, but there is content behind it.
For sure. So in a way of sort of bringing this into a landing, then where can people go to find your stuff? I guess social media and your website and such.
So on Twitter, you can find us at Return Snyder. We are on Instagram at Snyder_return. You can find our website at www.squarespace.snydersreturn.com. Everybody sort that out. We do have Facebook. It's more of a landing platform for our posts, but if you post on there or messages through any of these platforms, we will do our best to sort of get back to you in good time. We have a Discord server. It is quite new, and we are mainly using it for running our actual play and hosting one-shots and sort of just building a community there slowly. We did start a Patreon. It's bare bones, so we'll come back to that one in a couple of months, but we do have a Patreon if you want to support the channel that way, and we do have a Buy Me a Coffee. And again, there's no obligation to support us in that way. Even if you just left us a review on your preferred podcast platform or podcatcher or wherever you get your podcast from, we'd be greatly appreciated. Any feedback we can take in, discuss it amongst the team, and sort of look to steer the podcast in a way that suits our listeners, because that's ultimately who we create this content for. We enjoy creating it and we put it out there, but we want people to enjoy listening to it. Please get in touch either via Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or one of the other mediums, and we'll be really happy to hear from you.
Awesome. Okay, well, yeah, once again, thanks so much for joining me for this today. This has been a really interesting discussion.
Oh, thank you, AJ. Thank you for sort of having me on. Really.
Yeah.
Messing up your feed. I'm sure there are many other people you could have had on this evening, but we appreciate, or I certainly appreciate the invitation.
No, it's like I say, it's been a real fun discussion. So yeah, I'll give out our own things. As bad as I am at opening podcasts, I'm pretty bad at closing them as well. So I will just say to our listeners then, as always, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, all of which we're at Pretend with Dice. For those so inclined, you can find us on, again, I said it, is it Ko-fi? Either way, we're at ko-fi.com/pretendingwithdice. It's fine. The links are out there somewhere. And also please do join us on our Discord server, the links to which are in our Twitter bio and on the contact page of our Podbean site. That's, I guess we will call it to a close there. As to say, once again, thanks so much for joining me, Adam. It's been a lot of fun.
It has. Thank you very much, AJ.
Yeah, and we'll see you all later.